Hello, Watch Chat here with your reminder that life is short by the watch. Today I've got 3 watches in front of me, and the topic we're going to be discussing is why a lot of micro brands are destined to fail. First things first is to define what a micro brand actually is, and they're typically small independent owned watch companies that typically rely on external suppliers for components and manufacturing. This is slightly different to independent watchmakers, who on the other hand have expertise in managing their own equipment and production processes, and in doing so they have an ability to do this in-house in both design and production of their watches. Now that we've got that definition clarified, we'll focus on the micro brands. However, I must say this watch here is a Fears watch, which is considered an independent watch, but when I actually did a bit of research on it, I found that majority of these components are actually sourced externally and from overseas. So under that definition, it is questionable whether it's an independent watch or not. Regardless, we'll talk about micro brands today, so let's just put that one to the side and go through the micro brands. Now, this video is no way and by no means a bag on micro brands, because as you can see, I own a couple. The Studio Underdog Stephanie Blue and the Furlan Murray Outback Elegy. And I really enjoy both these watches. They're just fun pieces. However, I do find myself not wearing them too often, and I just sort of scratched my head and wondered, there's got to be a reason why. And in my view, whilst they offer something a little bit different and quirky, if you're after the top quality, best style of watches with heritage, then these micro brands sort of fall short. Now, when we talk about value, I'm talking about the affordable level of micro brands. So whilst it's all to personal preference, it's important not to confuse affordability with good value. In order for micro brands to remain competitive, they have to be able to produce a product at a good price. And yes, while these might be easy to cash flow, it always means that there's going to be some level of compromise. I'm not saying that for all. A lot of micro brands do a good job in balancing all these competing demands. However, a lot of micro brands really fall short and do compromise the product. So the question to ask yourself is it worth buying a bunch of micro brand watches? Or are you better off putting that money into one go anywhere, do anything watch, which is less compromising? There can also be quality control issues, because micro brands simply do not have the size and scale and resources to compete with the major players. So whilst I haven't had any problems with these watches, there is, in some instances, concerns with consistency and quality and production of the watches. There may be a lacking of spare parts and after purchase service, and there tend to be very little resale value of such watches. The watches also have a very limited brand history and brand recognition, so they lack this history, and it will take a lot longer for them to establish the brand name over the long term. As a result, many will tend to fade away because they do not have the funds to sustain this. I also see a reliance on very flimsy backstories and almost contrived design inspirations. Because whilst it's great that these are normally born from passion projects, passion can only take you so far. Something also I noticed is that every time there's a new release for some obscure micro brand or a upcoming release of a micro brand, that they focus a lot on hype, and in particular social media, and pumping out watches in the presence of social media. I get it, there's only so much you can do, and if someone's going to give a social media influencer or a personality a free watch, I'm sure they'll take it. However, it does make me wonder, would you actually buy it with your own money? That's the real test. I think micro brands also face a significant challenge when it comes to supply chains, because they are reliant on low-cost infrastructure and low-cost supply of materials from other production companies. So if there is a supply chain disruption, then they aren't able to produce their product quickly enough. They lose a degree of control over the production and distribution of their watches. The assembly and manufacturing may also not be as well developed, and so the watches may have issues with production and, again, delivery. Having said that, even the big companies are struggling with production. But the biggest issue is that the ability to scale. The fact that they're called micro brands in itself causes a bit of a problem, and that is the perception that they're always to remain micro. So in fact, as any business model that is based on low cost, then you have to be able to produce it in large volumes to be able to make your margins and develop a feasible business. If you are doing that, then your clients will be accustomed to low cost product. So then you get stuck in this downward spiral of supply pressures and production problems. Now, when you get to that point, you can't invest money in scaling up or developing a higher product because it costs more. And then as soon as you start lifting prices, your clients will turn against you. So that in itself is a conundrum. And in doing some reading, it's hard to estimate how many microbrands there are. There'd be hundreds, if not thousands. So it is a very saturated market as well. It makes it very difficult to stand above and provide a point of difference when in fact the competition is so stiff. I have read and heard of other issues with microbrands, and that is sometimes the designs are lacking. They look good on images at first, but then they can disappoint when you receive them because the quality also isn't as good as it's made out to be. That creates disappointment, and after the first round, clients are unlikely to come back with repeat business. Sometimes the components are also poorly chosen. So for a price point ranging in the $1,000 to $2,000 mark, most of the movements only cost $100 or $200, and so it makes it really difficult to justify the pricing unless it is well finished or has a very good design point of difference. In summary, I'm for microbrands, but I'm also mindful that many of them struggle and many of them are doomed to fail or stagnate. What I would say is it's a good summary of what microbrands face. So if you do like your microbrands, please support them, and if they increase their prices and you really like their product, just have a good understanding of why that's happened and what challenges they face, and then you may be willing to pay the price in order to help them grow. That's easier said than done at times. So if you like that content, please click like and subscribe, and remember, life's short. Buy the watch.